Welcome to the Eastgate podcast, where we explore topics of faith, culture, and the teachings of the Bible. To learn more information about Eastgate, you can visit our website at eastgateccf.com. Now let's jump into this week's episode. Welcome back to everyone who is tuning into this week's episode. I'm Jason Smith. He's Pastor Chris Smith. And he's wearing a shirt right now that says, Dr. Dad, Pastor Papa.
And on the back, did you see the back?
Does it say author? Because
No.
it should. Does it say marathon runner? Because it should.
No, let me
Does it
turn
say
around.
jelly-filled donut connoisseur? Because it should.
Oh, can you read that?
That's Dr. Smith to you. Dr. Pastor Chris Smith.
It's Dr. Smith to
That's
you.
right.
Yeah.
Hey, we're so thankful that you're joining us this week and tuning back in. We really appreciate your continued support.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways that you can show your support, if you are enjoying the content that you are hearing on this podcast, is to leave a review or subscribe, whatever platform you're listening on. We would really appreciate that. That goes a long way in helping us get this this podcast out to as many people as possible. And so it takes 2 minutes, but if you are enjoying what you have been hearing, then we would really appreciate that. Leave a review, leave a comment, subscribe, do all of that. Share this with your friends because we want to continue talking about stuff that pertains to faith and Christianity and the culture that we live in today, and so that we really appreciate all of the love on on that end. So, but this week we are going to be continuing our discussion on tithing. Last week's episode was kind of the kickoff episode, and I really enjoyed talking about the stuff that we did.
Yeah.
It went really fast, and so we decided that we wanted to have multiple episodes that was going to be covering this topic. So we're going to be kind of continuing this topic on tithing with part 2 today. And for just a quick recap, if in case you didn't get to listen to last week's episode, episode 7, I would encourage you to go back and listen to it. But Dad, we covered talking about tithing from. We covered some biblical perspective.
Yep.
You really leaned in on the personal testimony side of things and talking about how it's important for people to hear the personal side of things as opposed to the biblical side. Not that you shouldn't hear the biblical side, but the personal side goes a long way as well,
Sure it does.
because that way people can relate to it. And then you really encourage us. You can't outgive God. You also talked a bit about the difference between tithing and offerings and vows.
Right.
And then we dissected a few verses, which may emerge a little bit here today as well. But the biggest takeaways were we wanted to lay just the foundation of what is our responsibility as believers in tithing. Is this something that is just made up? Is there actual evidence of it in the Bible? Is it manipulation? Is it wrong teaching? Whatever the accusations are surrounding this topic today in our churches and in our world. So we touched on kind of a little bit of all of that last week. And we want to go a little bit deeper this week.
Yeah.
So I know that before we got going here, there were a few things that you and I were talking about pertaining to this. But where would you like to start today with all this? Because I want the people who listen to this. I mean, I want it to be a resource, obviously, and an open discussion on this topic. But the main perspective, because I know that my agenda is definitely going to be one to try to push people to understand this, not only from God's heart, but to actually engage in this.
Right.
That is my intention, because I am convinced, I'm convicted about this.
Yeah.
And I have reasons for that. So, but I'm curious where you want to start today in all of this.
Well, I think I go back to, as I've thought about this, it goes back to the intention. I think about what Jesus said in his Sermon on the Mount. He said, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." And, that's a very deep thing, a deep statement that Jesus said there, because it gets to the heart of many matters pertaining to the gospel. And the matter of tithing is one that is so controversial, and I think it's important for us to get to the heart of tithing.
Yeah.
We can get to the legalities from Leviticus. We can get to its impact on the New Testament church and Jesus' conversation to the Pharisees about tithing and social justice concepts. He did say that in Matthew 23:23 that he kind of got onto the Pharisees that they were tithing, but they had overlooked the things of justice and mercy and things like that.
Yeah.
But he did say in that process, don't neglect either of those.
Yeah.
So Jesus did instruct them to be about both, not just about social justice, but also about making sure there were provisions for the church or the nation of Israel in the storehouse.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to get back to the heart of the matter of this. For me, that was what convinced me, not just trying to draw a biblical or a theological position. We can always find a theological position to cancel out the things that we don't want to do. So we really have to get to the heart. And I was thinking this morning, Jason, about historically we see this come back up. The need for resources for the propagation of the gospel. And I really think that's where you have to land. Do we really believe the gospel is good news? In your heart, do you really believe the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ is good news? Because in your heart, if you really believe that, then you will take to heart what Jesus said about where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
Mm-hmm.
And for me personally, I have found, because of the impact of the gospel on my personal life, that's the reason I give tithes and offerings and vows personally, because I know what the gospel has done for me, and I know potentially what it can do for others. So I invest there.
Yeah.
So that is what I really want to hit on today. When I think about historically beyond the Old Testament and the New Testament, and we get into the period of the Renaissance, there's a great period of history there in the Middle Ages that really brings back to the surface in the church the need for people to give of their resources for the spread of the gospel. All of those great cathedrals that we see in Europe that are abandoned now, that are basically have become museums, those were funded because of the great revivals of the Renaissance. And both poor and the wealthiest of those in Europe understood the need and wanted to find a way to keep alive those revivals. And so they built these majestic cathedrals as a drawing factor to remind them and the people of the importance of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Okay, so today we still need to do the same thing. I think we do need it. We need a revival in our culture today, and we need a renaissance. And so it's our responsibility in this season of history to draw back to the heart of what the gospel means to us and the importance of it in order for us to really get to the heart of the matter of tithing. We have a responsibility. The church is in decline. We know that. I'm kind of preaching now. I'm sorry.
You're good.
I'm taking up
this is good. No, this is good.
Can I go a little bit further in history?
Yeah, you should.
You go from the Renaissance, then you come to America. All of Europe was when there was the discovery of this land that we call America that we're so familiar with. It was an unsettled territory. And so we had the Spaniards and we had the English and the French fighting for this territory. They wanted control of this territory. Now there were two reasons they wanted it. Some of them purely wanted the spread of the gospel into this new region. Others just simply wanted the natural resources that were here, the gold and the silver and all of that. But it was the intention, the reason that the Spanish invested so much money for settling in America was pitched to the people in Spain. There's a people group over there that need to hear the gospel, and so we need to invest. We need your resources to go invest in that foreign territory to spread the gospel.
Wow.
We need the Catholic Church to invest in this new territory. The English did the same thing. The Anglican Church said, we need your money, folks, because there's a territory over there and people over there have never heard the gospel. And that was their pitch.
Wow.
The separatists and the Puritans that separated from the Anglican Church, that was their pitch. That was their whole reason for coming over here, was the spread of the gospel. So they gave up everything they had, the comforts of the lifestyle they had, to come over here to share the gospel with a people group that had never heard the gospel. So I think we forget that over the course of time. We just take America for granted, but we have to understand that there was a tremendous amount of resources being poured into this country for the purpose of spreading the gospel to an unsaved people group. And so, we can, that was still 1600s when that was happening. So here we are today in the new millennium, and we've lost that. We've lost that fervor for the spread of the gospel.
Yeah.
And so I spent all that time setting that up just to say this: we've got to get back to the heart of the matter of tithing. We tithe not out of obligation. We tithe because we understand the value and the importance of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I know that was a lot.
No, but it's good to hear that, because I think that people there's a lot of I feel like there's like two things that keep people stuck in this mode of not either and not tithing, and it's one of it is due to a low level of, it at its core, it's a low level of faith is what it is. But it is masked under maybe a lack of discipline, a lack of, to be honest, it could be even like laziness.
Yep.
It's just, I don't want to, but at its core, it's a lack of faith. And we talked about that last week, was that if you have an issue with tithing, you don't have a money issue, you have a faith issue.
That's right.
It's not, it has nothing to do with the money. It has everything to do with the faith aspect of it. I know that sounds very bold and very straight, but I firmly believe that. I would unpack that with anybody, I'm very convinced about that. But then going from that, though, the other side of it is, if you have people who are in this camp of like, well, it's just not really been a priority. It's not a discipline. It's, whatever, it's lack of faith. The other side of it too is that keeps people disengaged from it is a tactic of the enemy to try to get them to believe, don't trust these people, don't trust churches, you can't trust pastors,
Right.
You can't trust, they're just taking your money and padding their wallet. They're just using, how well, do you really know where that money's going?
Right.
Do you, and those whispers get you to go,
yuck.
what, and so it keeps people stuck. And the tactic of the enemy in that is twofold. One, it's to keep the church the church of God from expanding, kind of like what you're talking about here. It takes resources to expand into new regions, to send people, keep people rooted in operational in a church, all those things. But then also it is a tactic to keep the people of God out from under the blessings that God has ordained.
That's right.
For people that do give.
Yeah.
It's a very real thing. It's not, this is not made up. Like, if you are and I think we talked about it a little bit last week, but this is your birthright.
Yeah.
If you like, we all were raised to the degree and to the we were all raised under the subjection of how our parents wanted us to be in the earth.
Right.
Right. Now, however hard or however little they really zoned in on that, determined your upbringing. And so, but you will have things that like your family would do that would be different than another family, and it would just be explained, or it would be understood. This is what we do as a family.
Right.
This is who we are. Well, no, we don't do that, because this is who we are as a family. For us, like one of those things, I know growing up, you guys really emphasize like Sundays being family day, right?
Yep.
That was always a big point of contention, because there were birthday parties were always on Sundays, or
For your friends.
Sundays
Yeah.
were, I was always asked to go and spend the night somewhere or whatever. And it was just like, this is just something that's just different. And I felt that very tangibly, right? There's other examples too, I mean, that could be used. But the biggest thing is, though, the takeaway from it is, this is how the Smiths were raised. Well, the people of God are no different. God has the same intentions. He wants, and you see that in the Old Testament, when he's laying out these ground rules through Moses in the book of Leviticus, it's with the intention for the people of Israel to be a separate nation.
That's right.
A holy nation for God, because they are God's chosen
And
people.
to look different.
And to look and act differently, and to live differently. So and tithing and offerings and everything was tied up in that, So with that, when you give, you are affirming and coming alongside of something that's already been instituted and put into place, a motion, a grace of God. You're affirming with that.
Yeah.
And if the enemy can get you to disengage from that, then he's robbed you of something. He's robbed you of some type of capacity to be able to experience an aspect of God that God promises
Right.
to his people. We talked about Malachi 3:10, the infamous passage. We should read that here.
Yep.
But it's one of the biggest passages I think that you hear probably in this topic of tithing. Malachi 3:10 says, "Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, so that there may be food in my house, and test me now in this, says the Lord of hosts, if I will not open up for you the windows of heaven and pour out for you a blessing until it overflows."
Yep.
And then it goes on to say, "Then I will rebuke the devourer for you, so that it will not destroy the first fruits of the ground, nor will your vine in the field cast its grapes, says the Lord of hosts." So I'll open up, test me in this, I'll open up the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing unto you. So if the enemy can get you disengaged from giving and bringing your tithes in, he disconnects you from something that's a very real attribute. Now, here's something that's that I think that's interesting in this. When we're thinking about, I'm actually really glad that you started with what you started, because I didn't know how we were going to connect into this, but I see it now. There are spiritual aspects and dynamics to tithing and giving. Then there's the reality.
Yep.
And the reality is, aside from the blessings and the act of faith that tithing is, the reality to tithing is, it helps keep an electric bill on at a church.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
What does the electricity do at a church? Well, goodness, it powers your live stream. It powers, your internet. It gives you the ability to have air conditioning. It gives you the ability to have, worship amplified and have lyrics for a projector. It keeps the refrigerators on for your food pantry.
Yeah.
We're talking about, this is a real thing. This is this isn't something that was
subjective.
mentioned in scripture per se, but this is like a reality to it, right? And you hear the saying a lot here now, but like, you vote with your dollars, And you're touching on this a little bit, but I want you to unpack it a little bit more, because there's people need to understand this concept of, what if it was just simply about supporting a mission, and take the spiritual blessings out of it.
Yep.
Just separate that for a second. They are there.
Yep.
They are real, okay? But just take it out for a second. What if tithing was just simply about supporting this cause?
Yep.
What if it was just about that? Would you still do it? Would that be the thing that would make you do it? I don't know, like, what the disconnect is, but what is your opinion and your years of being in ministry and seeing this? Like, what unpack that for us a little bit. Just the reality side of what giving does for a local body, for a church, and all of that.
Well, it's vital. And obviously, church leaders throughout history have not been successful at gaining the confidence of the people that they are leading as far as it comes to the integrity of finances. There's always been corruption. Anytime there's money involved, there's going to be corruption, because the heart of mankind does not do well with money. It's just, it is an evil. It's a necessary thing, but it's also, it just does something to us, and it corrupts us. Jesus himself said, you can't serve the God of mammon, because it's, you're going to have to choose who you're going to serve. And
you can't serve wealth and God.
Yeah. It is, and so it's really tied to the heart, to our hearts. And, but it is vital. We have to have it. It's interesting to me that this is one of the few areas that even our secular government acknowledges as sacred. Our federal government allows people to give to charitable causes or to the church and not tax it.
Yeah.
You get a tax break.
Interesting, yeah.
For those portions of your income that you give away. So it's interesting that even still to this day, our federal government recognizes the sacredness of what we give to charitable causes. So we do need to, we can draw from that. If our federal government says that it's a good thing to do, then we should, if we want to draw from secular sources, should be able to see that there's, what's behind that? Is it just because they're just giving us a little break? No, because it's instilled in cultures throughout history, the vital need for goodness and the support and the funding of goodness in our cultures. And that's really the premise of the church. It's made up of buildings, it's made up of electric bills, it's made up of payroll and insurance. It's made up in all of those things, but the church exists to promote and be a mechanism of goodness in our culture that the federal government recognizes. So if that can help be a stepping stone for somebody listening today, see that it is our government sees it as essential. We have to have resources. You have to have resources to be able to maintain your household, or you will become homeless. Churches have to have resources in order for them to be able to continue the works that God has called them to go do. Again, even as corrupt as some efforts are financially, we still have to draw into the reality that it is essential. It's essential. During COVID, many of our city leaders and government leaders found areas of the church that were essential. They deemed our food pantry as essential, and so they didn't shut it down. And so we were able to maintain, even through COVID, our church was able to continue to function as a church, as an essential piece of our culture, and again, recognized by our government leaders, because we had food in our church. We can't have that food. We can't have that building. We can't have that place for people to come and get food in times of need without resources.
Yeah.
So you need to see, people need to see that through the process of food being in our church. It gives us the opportunity to give away spiritual food as well.
I want to jump in on this.
Okay.
This is good because
Okay.
people, for those of you listening right now, I want you to picture your favorite grocery store.
Okay.
The one that you frequent.
Mm-hmm.
And the convenience factor that's around it.
Yeah.
Okay, so think about how you frequent that place, right? You know, and I know this. We go to multiple stores, like most, and because some stores have this thing that we like, and other stores this thing that we like. That is a total convenience factor, though, because it's convenient the fact that they are so closely located, right, to where we live. That doesn't mean that I have to support those businesses, but it's a convenience factor of saying, well, hey, I'm again voting with my dollar and saying I want this place to stay open,
right,
because I enjoy getting these resources from this place.
Yep.
And the convenience is I'm going to support this establishment so that it remains open, so that I can continue to come and get that resource.
That's good. That's right.
And why do we not think the same way about churches? What is the difference if it's spiritual food or if it's physical food?
Yeah.
It's the exact same. It genuinely is exactly the same thing.
It is.
But we have no cares at going to Kroger down the street, and we'll gladly spend the money there because we deem it as essential. We're like, well, I need this to live.
Yep.
You need that for your body to live.
That's right.
And the thing, and so what kicked me off on that example was, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and much like I'm sure we've all had conversations, and I know you have found yourself in these conversations as well, where my friend was saying, he was giving me this whole story about the reasons why he doesn't give money to the church anymore. And he was like really invested in this and like really just laying it all out there. And I was just letting him, speak, and I was just trying to hear him out and see where the disconnect was.
Right.
And what I found was his disconnect came from the church that he had attended. It always stems from a hurt, right? The church that he had attended, he grew up in a pretty impoverished area, and in a different country, and he came to realize that like the church was really heavy-handedly pushing these people who didn't have a whole lot to give to the church, while that meant, and this church had a lot of members, and so then it resulted in the church being having a very lavish building, and the pastors living very lavish lifestyles, while the people themselves really struggled. And he took an issue with that, and it was not. It rubbed him the wrong way. He was like, "Surely this is not how God intended it for it to be." These. I don't even know where my money's going. I'm giving, and they're telling me if I give $1,000 today, God's going to give me back 5,000. Yeah. And he gave some examples that I heard, and I was like, personally, I'm only hearing one side of the story, and it's always compelling when you hear one side of the story. There's a proverb somewhere around about that, but I don't know the full details of what happened at that church. I do know that has happened over the course of church history.
Sure.
There are people who have like really leaned in heavy, like, oh, come and sow your seed into this, and God's going to provide for your mortgage or whatever. Personally, I don't feel comfortable making those types of claims.
Right.
I don't know if I don't know what that is for me. Okay. But I just don't feel comfy saying those types of things.
Yep.
But that to me is different than I'm supporting a local house.
Right.
Right. So we were talking about this, and I was trying to encourage him and just be like, hey, look, like, just because there are churches that are out there that are doing this does not mean that every church
No, that's
is
right.
doing this. And one of the points that I made to him was, it's really, really sad because there are larger churches that are exploiting or have exploited people, okay? But and they remain open, right? And it leaves a bad taste in people's mouths, whatever. Again, sometimes we just get one side of the story and we don't
Right.
get both sides and we don't fully know all the details. But then you have smaller churches that are doing things really well and managing things vulnerably with integrity. And because of these experiences or these examples from these larger churches, these smaller churches that are being good examples are struggling to stay open,
Right.
causing them to have to close their doors. And they have the best intentions, and they are not exploiting people. They are very open with what the financial situations are of the church or whatever. And it's like, what a weird situation that is. And yet it is a total tactic of the enemy, because if he can get people to not give to church in general, then the smaller churches will suffer. Well, the larger churches may have a little bit more padding to coast for a bit, right?
Yeah.
But we were talking about that, and he was like, I can see that. And I said, isn't it interesting, though, that like you went to this larger church, and now you're not giving it all to a church, but your desire is to be connected to a smaller fellowship, but because of your experience at this larger fellowship, you're not giving to your smaller fellowship.
And you're not going to that smaller church.
and so it's just, what do you think about that? Because I know you've heard that before.
Yeah, well, I think it was back. I think we touched on this on that first episode on this. It comes back to hurt. A lot of people have been hurt. They don't give because they feel like they've been taken advantage of, or they are being manipulated. And again, it goes back to the heart. Where's your heart related to this? And when you really understand the treasure that the gospel is, if you really do know that the gospel of Jesus Christ is a treasure, you will put your heart there, and you won't care. You leave the results up to God, because ultimately we're going to answer to God. At the end of our lives, when we leave this life and we move into eternal life, we want it said of us, most of us, when we encounter Jesus in heaven, to hear the words, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." I mean, that's really the motivation of most pure-hearted Christians. They want to know that they've done a good job here. And one of the most essential ways to do that is to trust the Lord with all of your heart, all of your mind, and all of your soul, every part of you. And that includes your finances. And so when you really do understand the treasure that the gospel is, you will do it faithfully, everything that it requires to get that message out, and not be ruled by the hurt, and not be ruled by the manipulation and the corruption. You will trust God.
That's good, because the thing that my friend ended up going on to say, and again, I know this is all, none of this is new stuff. We've heard this 1,000 times, but he went on to say, he's like, well, I know I need to give, but I've changed now to where I only give to people who are in need, and I don't give to the church.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like I give to the people that truly need it, and I'm not giving to the church. And you talk about trust, and so one of the things that I brought up to him was, it was a great conversation. But one of the things that I brought up to him, I was like, well, listen, at some point I have to believe that God is bigger than any man.
That's right.
At some point, and whether or not yes, that situation at your old church hurt you, but you can't sit where you are today and tell me that nobody who gave was blessed back. You don't know that. You have no clue. There might have been people that were taken advantage of. Sure. Okay. Yeah. But do you think that God is big enough to be able to stand in between somebody trying to exploit somebody else and shield them and then judge the other?
Right.
One of the points I brought up to him was, dude, it is like, if you are a pastor, if you're a teacher, it says in Scripture that we will incur a stricter judgment.
Right.
Which means that if I'm doing something knowingly exploiting someone else as a teacher or as a pastor,
Yep.
as a leader in the church, that is a scary thing to be in the hands of God versus the hands of man.
Sure. Yep.
Now, we're using it from a man-made approach, trying to condemn and take vengeance out on mankind's evil nature, tendency to take advantage of or to steal or whatever it is, exploit, extort, all that. But can we let God deal with those men and those women that are doing that, and you just be faithful to what God has asked?
Yeah.
And he was like, well, yeah, I could see that, and I can't, he was, kind of agreeing with me, like, yeah, I can see that. And then I was like, you know what? I had never noticed this before, but this clicked with me. The story of the widow's mite. Okay, we talked a little bit about that last week too. The story of the widow, this is so fascinating to me, okay? You go back and you read that in Luke's gospel or in Mark's gospel, okay? The story is taking place, and Jesus is commending the widow as she is giving to what? The treasuries of the temple.
Yeah.
She is giving to the very people that will later crucify Jesus.
Yep. Yeah.
And Jesus
Yeah, how about
is
that?
commending her.
Yeah.
And then he's saying to the rich people, you didn't give nearly what she gave.
Mm-hmm.
And he's telling his disciples, he's saying, this woman gave more. He's commending her. But who is she giving to? She's giving to the institution, quote unquote.
Yeah, she is.
She's giving. It says in Mark 12, or Luke 21, but verse 41 of Mark 12, and he sat down opposite the treasury, Jesus, and began observing how the people were putting money into the treasury.
Yep.
This was a temple ordinance. This was a commandment. This is the stuff that you read about from Leviticus.
Yep.
And Jesus is, and it was like, I had never connected that fully.
That's right.
And so then I was talking with my friend. I was like, listen, if Jesus is commending her, and the Pharisees are the ones that are benefiting from this gift, right? This treasury, this all that. Then they're the ones that end up crucifying Jesus. Isn't that enough reason for Jesus to be able to stand in your shoes and say, you know what, we're all done with this. We're not doing this anymore.
Thing, yeah.
And yet he didn't.
He didn't.
He didn't. He allowed it to continue.
Yeah.
He wasn't condemning the whole thing. He was commending her.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's a very good perspective.
Because of faith.
Yeah.
Her faith is in verse 44, for they put in out of their surplus, but she out of her poverty put in all that she owned and all she had to live on. Why did she do that? She did that because she had faith in God.
That's right.
She believed that God would give and multiply back to her, or she did it out of gratitude.
Yeah.
You can give out of faith or you can give out of gratitude.
That's it. Yeah.
You can say, Lord, I don't even care if it's more than 10%. I'll give you 100 because I'm so thankful that I am not where I was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I am here today. Yeah. You healed me. You provided for me. You've raised me. You've, all those things. I'm going to give out of gratitude. What if we shifted to that? My gosh, we teach all the time, try to get people to give out of faith. Be faith-filled. What if we just gave out of gratitude and just be like, you know what, Lord, I tip my waitress, I tip I tip the bellhop at the hotel. Here's more for the church, Lord.
Yeah.
Here's more.
Yeah.
Here's more. Instead of, well, Lord, I'll give you the 10. I'll give you the 10.
Yeah.
I just, man, I'm getting riled up a little bit, but and when I shared this with my friend, it really connected with him, and I was really thankful for that conversation. It was really good.
That's great.
But
well, Jesus is he's not exposing the action as much as he's exposing the heart behind the action.
Totally.
In this
totally.
In this dialogue here. And so again, it goes back to the heart. What's your heart concerning the kingdom of God?
Yeah.
What's your heart towards that?
Closing thoughts for this episode. So we've kind of talked a little bit about, and I've got, maybe let's do one more episode on this topic, because I've got something else
Okay.
that it's
All right.
bugging me that I want to get out and
Sure.
talk about.
Sure.
But for in closing up this episode, we're kind of really focusing on like the institution of the church, present day, for giving and the importance of it.
Yeah.
For people, I want people to be able to take away from this. This feels more like a reality check, more than like I want to inspire you to give because we read this Bible verse. It feels
right.
like, to me, I would want the takeaway from this episode to be the reality check of you're supporting when you are supporting a local church, you are voting to keep those doors open because you believe in what's happening
Right.
there.
Yeah.
Why? Why should people do that? Why should Christians, let's start there. Why should Christians care enough to make that a priority? Why is that important?
Yeah. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Like, why is it important for a Christian to support a local house?
Well, for me, the first thing that comes to my mind is I think about the other people, aside from myself, that need to come into relationship with God. That's really what the church does. It's supposed to be a connecting point or a connecting place for people to come and have a personal encounter or experience with the living God. And so when I give, I don't just give because of my heart or because of my obligation or because of my gratitude or my thanksgiving. I give because I know the impact that my giving will have on someone else.
Mm-hmm.
It creates an opportunity for them, with those doors open and with that gospel being shared and with that worship happening and with those children's classes happening or that Sunday school class happening. It creates an opportunity for somebody to come in those doors and to have a personal, life-changing encounter with God.
Yeah, that's good.
That's really it.
Mm-hmm.
When we don't have that structure, we are left to our own devices. I can find God on the internet, sure, but I can also get a lot of confusion about God on the internet. Okay? So when we're left alone to our own devices and to our own exploration of who God is and what God is, then we open ourselves up to a whole lot of confusion.
Because there's no accountability.
Because there's no accountability, there's no structure. It's just all very individualistic. But the church exists to be a place, and every church every church that espouses to be a church of Jesus Christ, you can go on their website or whatever, and you're going to find their doctrinal position on things, because they understand the essence of what it is that their existence is for. And it's for that opportunity for people to come into an environment that's separated from the world, to get a cohesive and hopefully an integritous opportunity for people to come to know God personally in a way that's not individualistic, but corporate. And that's essential.
Give, you are supporting that mission happening.
Yes.
For the people in your community.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's why I think it's most important to give to a local body versus, not that it's wrong to give to churches that are abroad or whatever. I'm not saying that at all, but like, I think that there's a greater...
Yeah. That's why your tithe comes into your local storehouse, and you can give offerings and vows outwardly wherever you want. That's the difference between the tithe and the offering and the vow.
Yeah,
is that you establish that local structure with your tithe.
Yeah,
and then the offerings can go to that local establishment, but they can also go outwardly from there.
Because, I mean, like, if I live in Nashville, I mean, yeah, like, I want the gospel to increase in Europe.
Sure.
Of course I do. But I also want the gospel to increase where I'm living. I didn't get to, like, choose what city I was born into.
Right. Yeah.
Right? We're here. This is where you were born is where God wanted you to be. And where you're rooted right now is where God, hopefully where God wants you to be. Why wouldn't you want that to change?
Right.
And you can change that by supporting a local house.
For more information about Eastgate Creative Christian Fellowship, you can visit our website at eastgateccf.com. You can also help us reach more listeners by sharing or leaving a review. Thanks for listening to the Eastgate podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.